Welcome to your Accessing Personal Genius. My name is Andrew Bryant, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you here this morning. It's my job and as I said, great pleasure to welcome your trainer. And many of you will know this trainer through his many, many books. Others of you will know him for his contribution to the fields of cognitive behavioral science and of neuro-linguistic programming. But what you may not know is his commitment, his care, and his compassion in training this material. And I will want to let you know that this man will pursue and be persistent and passionate about you getting your outcomes from this training today, tomorrow, and the following day. So without further ado, I would like you to give a very warm welcome to my friend and colleague, your trainer, Dr. Michael Hall.
This is our first day of Accessing Personal Genius, and I hope you're here to access your personal genius so that what we're going to do is to be accessing states that we'll bring to our states. We'll be setting frames of mind, the kinds of frames of mind that'll make that personal genius possible. You interested in that? That's what we're going to do, and I'm really excited. You probably already know that this training is a training inside of a training. Around you are 32 people who have come here to become trainers in neurosemantics, and inside of this training, they've been here 8 days, and now this is a training inside of a training where we're going to put them to the test to see if they can coach you to access your personal genius. Now, of course, as we get started this morning, probably we need to define what this word genius means and how we're using it in this particular training. So as we get started, I'd like you to think about genius in 4 or 5 terms. These are some of the prerequisites of genius. One is focus. The ability to take your mind, whatever attentions are going on, to focus your attention to something. Genius involves that concentration. It also involves a sense of singularity, so you don't have to double track in your mind, but you're all there with your sensory acuity, your awareness, and your playfulness. So genius also involves a committed state where you're engaged, just totally and completely engaged. And when you're there, the world goes away, time goes away, sense of self goes away, and you're present. You interested in that? In the next 3 days, we are going to put that together as we access one state and another, and bring them to our self and whatever we're doing, setting some frames of mind so that we can make that happen. I began learning about accessing personal genius and these prerequisites of genius when I studied from Judith DeLosier and John Grinder a number of years ago in their book Turtles All the Way Down. And they listed 3, 4 prerequisites of genius. We've added 10 now. So we're going to go through patterns in the next 3 days, today and the next 2 days, 14 patterns that we will put these prerequisites on so that the Gestalt, the thing that is more than the sum of all these parts, will be that ability to step into the right state. Wouldn't you like to have that under your control so you could turn it on and turn it off at your command? That is what accessing personal genius is all about. So that when I need to be in state and engaged with whatever I'm engaged with, and it can be as simple as just talking to someone and being totally present. Have you ever talked to someone and you had a sense they weren't all there? I mean, Well, they were there, and they were okay mentally, but they weren't all there. And isn't that most of our problems when we're trying to do something of importance, that we're not all there? A part of me is thinking about this, and another part is worrying and concerned about that. And it's like we're double tracking, triple tracking, tracking 17 things, multiple tracking, and we're not all there. Personal genius is being all there. And when you're all there, then all your resources are available. And isn't that a great experience? Because then it feels like you're in the zone. So another way to talking about personal genius and what we're going to build up in these 3 days is getting in the zone. Athletes talk that way, and if you've been watching the Olympics here the last few days, you can see people getting in the zone. And sometimes when they get in the zone, world records, Olympic records are broken because they are all there with all their resources. So that is our direction and focus in these 3 days, and you've got some really excellent coaches to coach you through these patterns. And what we're going to do is exactly that. We're going to pick out, and in your manuals, there's a page where it talks about the 10 variables. The 10 pieces that we're going to add, that when we add these things together, it's going to create something more than the sum of the parts. It's going to create this Gestalt that we call being totally present. Now, another way to think about this is what Fritz Perls said. Fritz Perls, from whom NLP in part came from, said that sometimes the problem with us is that we need to lose our mind and come back to our senses. We need to lose that meta-mind with all of those things that's going on up there so that we can come back and with our eyes and ears and senses be in the moment. Now, the way we lose our mind is to set some frames that allow us to get lost in that engagement. So we'll lose that mind, and that mind then can actually create the freedom to get in there and just turn loose. So do you have something, some place, some engagement that you would like to get lost in? So that when you're there, you are there. A number of years ago, after I found this pattern in 1995, I took the metastating process and started doing that with this concept of accessing personal genius and the prerequisites of genius. At that time, I only knew 3 or 4, the ones I found in the book. And so I started running that with myself around the subject of writing and research. Because I had found for years, and it had been a painful experience, that I'd sit down to write, had something in my mind, and I had some ideas, and I'd sit down and go blank. Writer's block. And the first book I ever wrote took me 8 years. And it wasn't a fun experience because things got anchored. Once I ran that pattern, and I can tell you that once I've run that pattern, I have not had writer's block since. Because when I sit down, I'm there. And it's not that the intelligence increased, it's not that I knew something I didn't know before, it was just that I was more present to both the reading and the writing. And so since then I've been writing 3 or 4 books a year, writing 50 articles a year, writing a couple prefaces a year, writing a couple training manuals a year. It has just turned it loose. So what do you want to get out of this training? Because as we begin, one of the things I've learned about metastates is that if you become very intentional, if you decide at some of the higher levels of your mind that here is what I want, here's my purpose, here's my agenda, here's my direction, here's what I want, and you commission that intention, it will align your attentions to do service to your highest intentions. So as we begin, we're going to come back to this a time or two in this training. As we begin, what's your intention? If you were to identify, what do you want to walk out with 3 days from now? What do you want? There's two main objectives I have in this training. One is to introduce to you metastates as a model. So one of the things, maybe it'd be one of your objectives, is to learn the metastates model. We're going to spend 3 days and go through 12, 13, 14 patterns that are metastate patterns, and that may be your objective. The other main objective I have is to introduce to you the process and the patterns for accessing personal genius. So that may be a goal. But with that, there may be some other goals. Because if you can manage your state, and if you can manage the states that you have about your states, you could really have some top-notch state management. And that might be your goal, to really develop better state management skills. And if you can develop state management skills, to turn it on, turn it off, have your states instead of your states having you. Does anybody know that one? Your states having you. Where I come from, sometimes people wake up grumpy. I know this is a strange and a weird idea, but I mean, there are people who wake up grumpy, and they're in that grumpy state, and then they walk around grumpy all day, giving out grumpiness, talking grumpy, thinking grumpy, acting grumpy. And sometimes, before I knew about states, I thought they were grumpy. Then I realized I can walk away and get away from that grumpiness. They have to take it everywhere they go. Do you have your states, or does your states have you? So state management is having choice about that. We call that now emotional intelligence. Awareness of state, choice of state, being able to manage state, and to shift state at will. Well, if we can do that, then maybe there would be some specific states that you would like to be able to turn on and pop into at will. So maybe that'd be one of your outcomes. We've been working with the trainers here, and part of what we've been doing is being able to step into a trainer state at will. And that might be a state of alertness or excitement or passion or confidence or calmness or whatever the state is. So that may be one of your goals, one of your outcomes, to identify which state and to work on a specific state. As we get into this training, there's other applications. One application is, once I know about a state and how I can bring a state to a state, if I bring a negative state to my state, for the most part, it'll put me in odds with me. We call those dragon states. Anybody have a dragon? Anybody have any dragons roaring and fussing at you, sabotaging you? And when you want to do something, here's this dragon, negative thoughts, negative feelings, turned against self, putting us in self-conflict. So no wonder we're not present. We're inside fighting our dragons. So one of the goals of this training may be to slay some dragons, to tame some dragons, to transform some dragons. So that may be one of your goals. And of course, once you turn psychic, mental, emotional energy against yourself, you're sending messages of dis-ease to your body. So another application is health. Because we could now send some of these great metastates, we create great metastates by bringing forgiveness to myself, release, acceptance, appreciation, calmness, joy, all the healthful emotions that we could set as frames and create metastates. So what's your intention? What do you want to get from this? Let me introduce some of the co-trainers here with me. We've got them from really all around the world. Andrew Bryan has introduced me a moment ago. Andrew came from England, then Australia, and now Singapore. Andrew Bryan. Each of the co-trainers will be up on stage with me from time to time. Dennis Bridoux from England, originally from France. Where's the other trainers? Mike Davis from Ontario, California. Way in the back is Colin Cox from New Zealand. All the way over here, Reg, if you'll stand, from South Africa, Reg Reynolds. And we did invite a couple ladies, and one could not come, and the other will be here tomorrow. Michelle DeVow, who many of you know, will be here tomorrow co-training with me. We do have people from a lot of different places, and I'd like to acknowledge that and recognize that. You might have met people from just really all over the world. In our trainers training, we have 10 countries represented. So the largest group is from Australia. So everybody from Australia, will you rise? Who's from Australia? All the Aussies.
Aussie, Aussie, Aussie.
Very good. Thank you. Everybody from South Africa. We've got several from South Africa. Very good. South Africa. We've got several from England, so those of you who hail from England. We've got a couple from Norway. Where's our Norwegians? We've got one from Ireland somewhere. Where's Ireland? We've got a couple from Singapore. Singapore? Where's our Singapore people? Hong Kong. Hong Kong. Malaysia, from Malaysia. And have I missed someone? Indonesia. 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 And anywhere else? Oh. USA. Denise. Anywhere else? Japan. Japan. And another from New Zealand. So, from New Zealand. Anywhere else? Scotland. Where's our Scottish? Beam me up. Come on. Ian. And we have a few who hail originally from France. So we got quite a mixture of people here today. On the camera is Tom Welsh, and Tom is from North Carolina, now Baltimore. And on music is Steve Hodgson. If you haven't met Steve, you will. Steve. As we get started, the importance of what we're doing is that we are going to be setting some frames for our minds so that we can get into some really great states. And as we do that, the purpose of this is, as we mentioned, to learn metastates and to apply it to personal genius. For those of you in the coaching track, those of you who have come through NLP practitioner or master practitioner or coaching essentials, and now here at Coaching Genius, we're going to be introducing 14 patterns that are actually coaching patterns that you can use. We will invite you to be coached to those patterns for the specific pieces of what we're doing. And then from that application, we can look at all the other places we can apply it. How many is in the coaching track that leads to meta-coaching? How many is in that practice that will meet us in Sydney maybe next week, week after, I can't remember when it is, when we do the coaching track, okay? So what Michelle will do when she gets here tomorrow is be applying this to coaching, and to the structure of coaching and how we're going to be doing that. Right now, we're going to give you a chance to identify your outcomes. Has everybody written down something? If you'll open your manual somewhere, and I know that we don't have a lot of blank sheets in that manual, but somewhere if you'll find a blank page or a blank sheet of paper and identify 1, 2, or 3 outcomes of what you want from the training. That 3 days from now, 2 days from now, as you walk out on Sunday evening, you'll walk out and say, this is what I've accomplished. This is what I was going after. And this is what makes me feel like my time, my energy, my emotion, my money is well invested. Because this is what I want. So does everybody have something from the menu list that we gave you of something that you want to accomplish? If you'll write down some of your outcomes for this training, or even more specifically for what you want today, then in a moment we'll give you a chance to express some of those outcomes. What's your intention? What do you want? What would be your application? So does everybody have at least one? At least one outcome?
Another thing to mention is you're going to be working on yourselves
Yeah.
in partnership with the coaches that are here and with each other. And of course, in the process of working on yourself, occasionally stuff comes up. And that's a good thing, isn't it? Because that allows you to work with it. But realizing it's just stuff, it's just thoughts, it's just emotions, that you can just process those thoughts
It wasn't me.
and emotions. Wasn't me either. So if you find, you feel like you're getting in a bit of a spin in the mind, just let one of the coaches know and we can work with you and work through that. So just be okay with that. It's just part of the process.
We've asked 10 of our trainers in training to be team leaders. So if you team leaders will stand now, and so if you'll go to your team number, and I guess the team leaders, you can put up the fingers for your group, and we'll get into the group for 12 minutes to identify your intention and to get acquainted a little bit, and then we'll be back here to begin. Where we are and where we're going, page 7 in your training manual, page 7 gives you the schedule, the APG schedule for where we're going to go, and you can see day 1 as we welcome you to the matrix of your mind and some of the things we're going to talk about. The first section there is on introducing metastates as a model, so that's what we're going to do now. You can see what we're going to do tomorrow and the next day on page 7 and 8. The prerequisites of genius on page 9 gives you an overview of this training. In the APG training, what we're going to do is to learn how to metastate ourselves for personal genius. And our belief is that there's a structure. There's a structure to genius, and we're going to find that structure, and that'll give us the highway into excellence. You'd like to know that highway? That highway to excellence? So that we can travel that highway. The next page, page 10, gives you the 10 critical variables or features of genius that we'll be metastating ourselves, and that'll be the direction we'll go. As we get started, I need to give a warning. Danger, danger, and this is page 11, second paragraph. To learn metastates involves a different kind of thinking. In NLP, how many people have got training in NLP here? Excellent. How many do not have? How many are NLP virgins? Ooh. We always like to say, fresh brains to play with. NLP does a lot of strategy work, and what we mean by that is, what do you think first? What do you think next? What do you think next? And what do you think next? And do you make a picture? Do you make a sound? Do you have a sensation? And we have a linear strategy to figure out how do you think and feel that creates your experience, a strategy. What we're doing with metastates is not linear. It is non-linear. It is very systemic in that sense. And as we get into metastates, you're going to find oftentimes your mind spinning. Because actually that's how the brain works. The brain does not work logically in a linear sequence. That's why mathematics for most of us is difficult. Because most of us go in circles. You ever do that one? You think about something and then you think about it again. Then you think about it again. and you can do a circle downward or upward. You know, why did I think that? Must be something wrong with me. I'm so ashamed of myself. But I shouldn't do that because I know better. And there I go shitting on myself. And so we think, and then we think about our thinking, and it can send us into a spiraling downward experience until it gets worse and worse. So that some people actually say, I am going to stop thinking because it makes things worse. I know people who are committed to not thinking. To avoiding awareness. Ooh, awareness. But we can also spiral upward. We can think something and then get excited about that and then get passionate about that and get curious about that and get passionate about that. And so we can spiral upward. And those are wonderful times. So in metastating, I am hoping to put you into a spin. And if I don't thoroughly and absolutely confuse you by the end of the day, I will not have reached one of my goals. Now, when you go into that spin, When your thoughts about your thoughts and about your feelings, about your thoughts, about your memories, about your imagination, about your intention, about your decision, about your identity, it all gets kind of going in that way, and you feel like you're in the blender. When you get like that, just enjoy the ride. Because if you try to stop it, it'll intensify it. But if you go for the ride, you'll just see where the stream of consciousness goes, and where the eddies are, where the tornado of the mind goes, and just enjoy the ride. Because once you learn how to ride the torrents of your mind, the winds of your mind, once you learn to ride it, then you can really manage those higher levels of your mind. So as a warning, learning metastates involves a different kind of learning, and oftentimes we'll go for a spin, and just accepting that and welcoming that and learning to play with that is going to be at the heart of learning this. Page 12 has today's agenda, introducing reflexivity. And for the things we're going to do today, we're going to talk about ownership of our powers, accepting self, appreciating self, and standing in awe of our sense of self, and then meditating confirmation and disconfirmation to create some really empowering beliefs. And then we'll end this afternoon, as you send you off this evening back home, with pleasure. Somebody has to do it, so we'll just have pleasure upon pleasure upon pleasure, and they'll wonder, where did you go today?
Can I go with you tomorrow?
On page 12, as you see the beginning there about states, what is a state? This is going to be our first definition. A state is a mental, emotional state, a dynamic mind-body state of experience that operates as an experiential energy field. We experience life in specific mental and emotional states. Our state of mind, our state of body, our state of emotion are so integrated and interrelated that we really can't separate them. So we start with a person responding to something in the world, and whatever we respond to, as we respond, we have some kind of state. And so we're going to play with states. You can't understand metastates unless you really understand states. So that's where we begin with states as an energy field, as a state of mind, as a state of body, and the summation of that is a state of emotion. So we'll tie all that together, a mind, body, emotion, state. Some of the components are cognitive, some of the components are somatic and emotional and physiological, and some of the components have to do with the very neurology and physiology that we're in. So a mind-body state. And this is where we start. And part of the reason we start here is because the quality of your life is the quality of your states, isn't it? When you put your head on your pillow at night, what has been the quality of your day? The quality of your life? Well, the states you've been in. If you've been grumpy all day, irritable all day, frustrated, stressed, angry, fearful, apprehensive, worried, the quality of your life is the quality of your states. So if I want to have a higher quality life, I need higher quality states. Mental states, emotional states, and physical states. And when I have those states and can repeat those states, then that increases the quality of my life. So we start with state, and I'm just going to go through some things that's really State 101. I think the next page has that as a title, State 101. And for those of you who've been through NOP, this will be just summary really of NOP practitioner. So here's a mind-body state, a neuro-linguistic state of awareness. And a couple facets of the state. A state is a response to something out in the world. It's our response to some stimulus. And the genius of NOP is the genius that how I think is I make a movie in my mind. I make a movie in my mind of whatever I'm thinking about. So if I want to go into a state, I think about something in my mind that will correspond to that state. Now, I've used a number of metaphors as I've thrown out some things, like the whirlwinds of the mind, like a blender, like spinning up or spinning down. How did you represent that in your awareness? What movies played? Or did you make a snapshot? Or did you just say words to yourself? So words make sense when you can make a movie. You can see, hear, feel that movie in your mind. And then we can explore the qualities of that movie. Is the movie way out there? Or is it really close? Or are you inside the movie? The more you're inside the movie, the more you'll feel the movie. Well, this is State 101 as we think about how we get into states. This gives us two royal roads into state, so that I can get into state by thinking of certain things, and I can get into state by my body. So that gives us two royal roads into a state of something. Later on, we'll play with appreciation. If you wanted to access the state of appreciation, what would you need to see on the movie of your mind? This morning, I got up before dark and ran on the beach and watched the sun come up. It's only the second time in my entire life I've ever done that. 2 days ago, I did that for the first time. And as I watched that sun come up, it gave me a sense of just the magnificence of the sunrise with the clouds and the colors and feeling the breeze from the waves. Are you making a movie? Is it easy to make a movie? So you're not making the visual movie. So if you're not making it visually, are you hearing these words? Could you hear the crashing of the waves? Could you feel the breeze? Could you smell the salt? Could you have a sense of that sun and the brightness? At first it's red, and then it's a little bit orange, and then it's brighter yellow, and it gets brighter. So we make movies in our mind, and sometimes there may be no visual, there's just a soundtrack. Just words somewhere in that soundtrack. And of course that puts us into a state of some sort. With regard to state and this awareness, state awareness means we become aware that we're in a state. I never leave home without being in some state. Everywhere I go, I find myself in a state. How about you? What state are you in right now? Good state. And if you were to make that a little bit more specific, are you calm? Are you curious? Are you calm? Receptive? Playful?
Who's curious?
Anybody in a curious state? Anybody in a learning state? Okay, who's in a learning state? So awareness, it's like we can become aware that I'm in a state of mind, body, emotion, and as we become aware of that state, we could get into that state more by our thoughts or by our body. If you were to use your body to put yourself in the most ferocious, intense, powerful learning state, what would you need to do with your body? You need to shuffle around or set up or move or take your eyes or get out your anchor. I always get out my anchor for my learning state. So if one of those learnings come by, I want to catch it. It helps me to be in a learning state to use that physiology. And for me, setting up, having a little bit more muscle tension helps me. And the eyes just kind of searching, fishing, looking. So from our physiology, we go into state and we recognize it's a mental state, it's an emotional state, it's a somatic state, it's a personal state, an energy field, as it were. Well, the question we can now ask about that energy field is how much? How much do you have that state? How many here has at least a 2 from, if 10 is absolute, 0 is not a chance in hell, how many have at least a 2 in terms of learning state? How many have at least a 2? Okay. How many have at least a 5? Who can give me a 6? 6? Any 6s? 7? 7? 7? 8s? Going for 8? Anybody above 8? All right, so some of you have really put yourself into a very intense learning state. The question now becomes, how are you doing that? What are you doing inside your head that makes that possible? And those of you who may be at a 4 or 5, somewhere around there, what would you need to do to make it more so? So okay, and that's our discovery. That's what we're going to explore. How do you do that as we become conscious of our states? But the intensity of the state and the gauging is something we're going to be using a lot in the next 3 days, asking how much do you have that? Is that enough intensity? Is that enough energy? Is that enough emotion to do something with that state? So the intensity of a state is another key facet of states. Another facet of states and a part of state management is the ability to access a state. We say in NLP there's two ways to access a state. Remember a time when. Have you ever been in a state of appreciation? Have you ever appreciated something? I don't know what you appreciated, but I wonder what you can think about even now as you remember it fully, as you think about something that you just melted in appreciation for something. Ever had one of those?
How many of you have ever been in a state of playfulness where you just had fun with your learning? And what is that like when you're in a state of just playfulness and curiosity about what's going to take place? How many of you have ever had that in your life? Do you like that? Do you enjoy that? Oh, okay.
So as you access that, now some of you will immediately, as it were, the Rolodex of your mind, the videotapes of your mind, you'll just pull out something, see it again, go into it, and feel it fully. But some of us are a little bit more choosy and picky. We kind of go through, and so we go through picking, and by the time the speaker gets done speaking, they're on to something else, and we're still making our choices of which one we want to choose to go into. How fast can you access a thought, a memory, so that you can go into it again and give yourself permission just to feel it? The opposite side is the imagination. I know you have never been playful, but if you were playful like a child again, and just had that smirk on your lips, little mischievous playfulness, and you came to this training a little mischievous in your playfulness, I know you can't, but if you could, what would that be like? So we can imagine. So we have memory and imagination as two mechanisms for accessing a state, and we'll be utilizing those because this is just part of state accessing. Who knows about state dependency and what that means and how we use the term? How many know about state dependency? State dependency means that when you get a state and you get it more and more and more and more, after a while, your learning, memory, imagination, communication, behavior is dependent on that state. So like the grumpy person, if they have a lot of it, they see the world in terms of grumpiness. They remember things in terms of grumpiness. They imagine the future full of grumpiness. They talk grumpy. They act grumpy. That their expressions are functions of that state, and so state dependency. So if you've ever been ludicrous, anybody been ludicrous in that state? A couple drinks will do that one. Just go without sleep for a couple days and you can get into a really ludicrous state. Be with some good friends and just have a wonderful time in the evening with some good friends and you can get in that state. And when you're in that state, the world looks ludicrous. And you can be laughing at a lampshade. And the next day when you're in a serious state, you can wonder, I know it was funny, but I can't remember how or why. People who get into the drunk state, the tipsy state is like that. When they're outside and not in the drunk state, but in the sober state, they'll even swear that they didn't do some certain things. Because they'll have amnesia from one state to the other.
How many of you have ever picked up a Michael Hall book and you're reading it? And you're getting it, it's like, yeah, this is what I was looking for. And then the next day you pick it up, you're like, huh? What?
That's not a good illustration.
But it's state. The state you're in determines your learning and your remembering.
So state dependency is really critical in what we're going to do now, because from state dependency, we can move into meta-states. So we start with one state, and how we bring one state to another state is through that intensity of the state and the energy of the state, so that if I get real playful, and I bring my playfulness to my learning, so that I'm playfully learning. Now when we did that as children, we probably got punished. Get that smile off your face, you're in school. This is serious stuff. And so they didn't allow us to be just playfully learning. If we bring one state to another state, then this is what creates the metastate structure. So once we know how a state works and the state has enough intensity, then we could, with our thoughts and feelings as a state, we could bring that state of learning, of joy and playfulness, back to our state of learning. And then we create a complex state that we can call joyful, playful learning. So that the higher state, as it were, embeds the lower state. The lower state is embedded in the higher state. So our thoughts and feelings of playfulness, as we bring it to bear upon that, as we apply it, uses our self-reflexivity. Now there's a mouthful, and we're going to introduce this term, self-reflexivity. We can reflect upon ourselves. So that I'm in the state, and then I can, kind of like in the back of my mind, I got a thought and a feeling about the state I'm in. So if I ask you the question, what do you think and feel about being angry? Do you like your anger? Do you not like your anger? Do you welcome your anger? Do you reject your anger? Do you shame yourself for your anger? Do you throw a party because you know how to be angry? What do you think and feel about your anger? And whatever you answer is your metastate about the anger. So from state, we go to state dependency, and this gives birth to metastates. For those of you new to the word meta, here's the word meta. It just means something higher. That's all it means. It's something that's in a relationship to another thing, so that when we have something meta, this is about the lower. It is, as it were, metaphorically above the lower, and it is about the lower. When you're in a state, our thoughts and feelings are about whatever that stimulus is that's coming. So if there's a wild dog barking, I might be afraid, apprehensive, fearful, feeling in danger state. But when my thoughts and feelings come back to me, I'm no longer in reference to the world. Now I'm in reference to myself. Self-reflexivity. And if I bring fear to my anger, become afraid of my anger, then I start to create this meta relationship so that one is above the other, or joyful learning. So the meta function is when we take one state and put it in a relationship to another state so that it is about that other state. And we not only do this once, but what do you feel about your fear of your anger? Well, I feel ashamed of my fear of my anger. Well, what do you think and feel about your shame of your anger? Well, I shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, you shouldn't be doing that because what do you think and feel? Well, I think I should have more control. So you don't feel that, so you feel out of control about your fear of your anger, and it just can spiral in an upward or downward way. So that's what meta means.
And so in the neurosemantic model, we distinguish between two types of states. We have, well, as Michael was talking about, meta states, which is a state about a state. And then we have primary states. And that's the state when you are referencing something out here. So if I'm afraid of speaking to you, my fear is about you. I'm afraid of the audience. And then I can go meta to that. I may hate my fear of speaking to the audience. So we have primary states. We're referencing something out here. This is what Michael's talking about down here. The primary state is in reference to something external. And then we have the meta state, is when we're bringing states back to bear upon ourselves, upon the primary state that we're having about something in the outside world. Everybody understand that? So we have two types of states within the neurosemantic model, the metastates model. We have primary, and then we have meta states.
Okay. And the difference is what is it about, as it shifts from about out there to about in here. This next diagram is awareness of awareness, and it's really the first metastate that we all experience. Most of us learn to experience this around 9 months, a year old. We start having the ability to think and feel about ourselves, and we have self-awareness. A lot of animals have no self-awareness. Some of the higher intelligent animals actually have the ability to step back and be aware of themselves. And at first, this is a strange kind of meta state as we have self-awareness. And during the teenage years, when we became really self-aware and how we're coming across and what we think in our minds other people are thinking about us, it becomes one of the very first metastates of self-awareness. And this awareness, if it is kind and gentle, accepting and appreciating, then allows us to discover ourselves. But if it's judging, if it's shaming, if it's fearful, then we can really get at odds with our very sense of self. The stuff of metastates is the stuff of states, and it's just made out of thoughts and feelings and physiology. So as we demystify and pull out the variables, the elements that we're playing with, it's just our thoughts and feelings about our thoughts and feelings, or even our physiology about our physiology, as we now set frames. So here's some other language about metastates. As we bring one state to another, we're actually setting a frame. What's your frame of reference for learning? It's probably fun. It's probably passion. It's probably curiosity. It's probably desire. So whatever state you've brought sets a frame. I know people who bring boredom to learning. It's so boring to learn. And when that frame of mind, with that meta state, their learning state is textured or outframed or tempered with that frame of mind. So to get through to them, not only you deal with a primary state, but you deal with that frame of reference, which is a belief frame, a value frame, an intention frame, and many other frames. So when states go meta, as Mike just described, we have several kinds of states. First of all, primary state, and then metastates, and then layers of metastates when these states go meta. Here's some other language that we use to describe some of this. We call it transcending and including, so that we transcend our primary state. You're in a learning state, or maybe you're in a fearful state or an angry state, any primary state, you're in that primary state, and then you can have thoughts and feelings that might be more resourceful as you bring joy to your anger, acceptance to your anger, appreciation to your anger, and whatever you do, you're setting a frame about that lower state, and now you're having some interplay, some sequential interplay between the states. Everybody here can do serious? Give me serious. Whatever you do for serious, furling brow. Think about something you get serious about. And what's the physiology of serious? And what's the breath of serious? And what's the face of serious? Is that different from playful? Now give me playful. And what do you think about playful? Whatever you defined it as. Doesn't make any difference for this. So that's what we're looking at. So is it, now let's do the play. Let's do the interplay. Could you be serious about your playing? You ever see anybody playing seriously? That's when we holler, "It's a game! Lighten up!" Some parents with their kids playing football, they get really serious. Is that different from playfully being serious? Being earnest, caring, being committed, wanting the best, wanting to search for excellence, but doing it playfully. So the sequence, the syntax of what state you bring to another state makes all the difference in the world. And so as we transcend what state with what state, and as you transcend, we include the bottom inside of the highest. This is why metastates is not the collapsing of anchors. So if you've learned NLP, this is not collapsing of anchors. There are times when one state will collapse another, but it is the coalescing of states, not the collapsing of states. Because we are going to enrich with frames as we transcend and include. And what happens is a new kind of logic occurs. And we call it psychologics. If you put that together, it's psychology, but if you separate it, it's psychologics. And that's what Alfred Korzybski did, is he separated that word. What does anger mean to you? Oh, you shouldn't be angry. You wouldn't like me angry. Oh, so you're afraid of your anger? I used to do a lot of anger control with the state of the Department of Corrections in the state of Colorado. And I would have anger control classes, and mostly guys. And I would say, what do you think about anger? And they say, oh, I don't like it. It gets me in so much trouble. You wouldn't like me angry. I said, what? You jerk when you're angry or something? How has anger been embedded? What has anger been embedded in? And because they're afraid of the anger, they hold the anger back, they push it down, they won't be angry until they can't stand it any longer and they explode. And they say, see, it's dangerous. So they have it embedded there. Part of anger control that I did was to bring acceptance to the anger. By bringing acceptance to it, it's just an emotion. Change the meaning, change the belief, change the metastate, and we bring acceptance to it. Because once I can accept, okay, I'm angry. Something has violated my values somewhere. What should I do? So I can have presence of mind while angry. So the transcending and including is a key facet of metastating and the structure there.
So like Michael was saying, in the metastates model, we don't collapse. When we're talking about going meta, setting frames, we're not collapsing, we're coalescing. Another way we talk about it is you texture a state. How many of you ever had bland food? Just no taste whatsoever. And so when you have bland food, what do you do with it? You add spices, right? When you add spices, whether it's salt, whether it's pepper, that doesn't make the food go away. The food doesn't collapse. But you begin to texture the food. In one sense, what you're doing is you're metastating your food. And it begins to take on a different texture, different quality. It's still the food that it was, but now with different qualities and textures that gives you a whole new experience of the food. So with metastates, that's what we're doing. We are adding states, we're layering states, we're texturing states, we're setting a frame, and it encompasses what was there before, and now you have a new experience of what was there before. So you can have anger, or you can have calm anger. You can have acceptance of your anger. I work with people sometimes who feel like they can't be angry because anger is a bad thing. And so they've metastated anger, it's bad, it's a taboo, it's sinful, it's whatever that it is, and so they're constantly rejecting it. But they bring acceptance upon it, calmness to it. Now it's something not to be afraid of, it's something to work with. And it can become a valuable tool. So we texture. We don't make it go away in the sense of that when we're collapsing anchors, we're texturing, we're setting a new frame, creating a new experience.
So let's put this together with state and metastate. Here is just state, just induction of state, accessing state. Charlie Brown's trying to get Snoopy into a state of wanting supper. He says, Snoopy, supper time. And he gets no response. So he says, all right, if you don't want your supper, I'll give it to the cat next door. Here comes Snoopy. This is induction of state. It calls forth a response. Here's induction of state. Charlie Brown says, look, Linus, it's silly for you to be scared of libraries. Linus says, but they're always so still. And when you walk in, your footsteps echo like you're in a great tomb. And when you go up to the front desk, the librarian looks at you with her great big eyes and, ah! Here is phobia installation. You got a movie going in the mind of the librarian in the library. Sometimes we do it to ourselves. Sometimes just by thinking we do it. If you're an animal, you always have to be on the alert. Sometimes just the hearing of a snap of a twig may make the difference between life and death. And here comes a twig. Ah! It wasn't quite what he thought it was going to be. So we set ourselves up as we think, as we play different movies in our mind. How can anyone like someone as blah as I am? Charlie Brown says. Lucy says, please don't despair, Charlie Brown. Maybe there's a girl somewhere in the world who's just as blah as you. And you'll marry her. And maybe you'll raise a whole flock of blah kids. And maybe they'll go out and marry other blah kids. Ah! The installation of states. But sometimes we do it in a real positive way. There's that pretty red-haired girl. Ah. I wonder what would happen if I walked over to her desk, put my arms around her, and gave her a great big kiss. Wow! Knocks him off his seat, he's thinking so much. I've got to stop thinking about things like that. So there are states, primary states, as he's thinking about things outside of him. But then we can go to the meta level. And here's Charlie Brown going to the meta level. You look kind of depressed, Charlie Brown. I worry about school a lot. I also worry about my worrying so much about school. My anxieties have anxieties. Do you ever worry about the world getting blown up, Charlie Brown? He says, it all depends. What day is today? Tuesday. Well, on Tuesdays, I worry about personality problems. Thursdays is my day to worry about the world getting blown up. I had to go to the school nurse today because my stomach hurt. You worry too much, Charlie Brown. No wonder your stomach hurts. You've got to stop all this silly worrying. How do I do that? That's your worry. 5 cents, please. So, metastates. Violet says, what are you two standing here looking so worried about? We're afraid of the future. Now, you can tell this is not a primary state because where do you see the future? It's their concept of the future. Are you worried about anything in particular? Oh, no, we're worried about everything. Oh, yes, our worrying is very broad-minded. And you can notice now that we see the beginning of psychologics. Because when you put a different word, a different label on it, and you classify it in a different way, when it was classified everything, we worry about everything, and then when you reframe it as our worrying is very broad-minded, it begins to create some differences there. Lucy has been wanting Linus to worry about overpopulation. All right, you want me to worry about overpopulation? Look, I'll worry about it. He says, look, I'm worrying. And he says, how was that? And she walks off. Well, you don't want me to overdo it the first day, do you? And now we begin to see some of the magic of metastating. When I had the guys in anger control, one of the things I would ask them to do is, well, show me your anger. And they would all do the same thing. And I would say, you wimps, that's all you can do. Show me some anger. So they would do the Incredible Hulk thing. And I said, well, give me the sound of anger. And when I worked with the boys, I worked with some boys one time, 14 to 18, on anger control. And they said, well, we can't cuss here. I said, for the next couple minutes, say whatever you want to say. Show me your anger. And they spew out a whole line of cuss words. And I would say, you wimps, my sister can do better than that. And they'd get angrier. And I said, well, turn it on some more. And so once they could turn it on, because if you can turn it on, turn it down, turn it off, say, are you girls, because I always do that to them, you wimpy girls, are you man enough to take a deep breath and not doing that Incredible Hulk thing, just keeping your arms really relaxed and using a nice calm voice, can you tell me how you're mad as hell about something? And they would try. So they would try to do that. And they would get caught up in the story. They get caught up in the content and get angrier. I said, you wimp, I knew you couldn't do it. You're not man enough to do that. Because I was challenging them. I was bringing a frame of challenge to them to see if they were man enough to be calm while they're angry so they could have control of their voice and their breathing. And I would just go piece by piece. Are you man enough to breathe deeply while you talk this way? And so bringing something to something else, and in this intentional way, sometimes really changes it. Here's Charlie Brown, who says, this song always depresses me. It brings back such sad memories. You know what I mean? I've never heard another song that depresses me the way this one does. Play it again, will you? You ever know somebody who enjoyed depression? Someone who had playfulness with their depression?
Did you hear the meta-state in that? Someone who enjoyed depression?
You say Miss Othmar is only human. Well, I say she's more. Like all good teachers, she has in her being a touch of the Spirit fired by the dedication of her calling. And he sniffs. Forgive me for crying, but that was one of the most moving speeches I've ever heard. Self-reflexivity. Awareness of ourselves as we're experiencing ourselves. Lucy says, I'm a real pessimist, and I'm not ashamed to admit it either. I'm proud of it. I was a little discouraged there for a while, but not anymore. Right now, I'm very optimistic about my pessimism. So the interplay of state upon state. So here's pessimism, and I'm discouraged about my pessimism is really not up to par, not very robust pessimism, skepticism. And when she says, I was proud of my pessimism. So we're beginning to see the logic that if I embed pessimism inside of pride of pessimism, it makes it stronger. And so be careful what you bring encouragement to. Charlie Brown says, look here, Lucy, I don't like all this talk about me being wishy-washy. Who do you like better, your mother or your father? Well, wishy-washy. So there's induction of state. Next year, I'm going to be a changed person. That's a laugh, Charlie Brown. I mean it. I'm going to be strong and firm. Forget it. You'll always be wishy-washy. Why can't I be changed just a little bit? I'll be wishy one day and washy the next. You need to be more firm, Charlie Brown. If you want to go along with the crowd, go along with the crowd. Be like the willow tree. Stand up and bend whichever way the wind blows. Take my advice, Charlie Brown. Stick up for your right to be wishy-washy. So firmness about wishy-washiness, firmness about unfirmness can blow it out, can make it so that it doesn't compute. So this gives us a look at metastates, how we bring one state upon another state, and how this creates different gestalts. In fact, that's the third state we'll be working with. Primary state, metastate, and then when you bring multiple levels of metastates, and you texture it, and you qualify it, sometimes in that mix, sometimes something more than the sum of the parts will emerge. And we call that a Gestalt state. So this now explains logical levels. For those of you who come from NLP, I have to tell you that there's no such thing as logical levels. I've never stumbled over a hunk and said, who left these logical levels here? I've never opened my refrigerator and said, somebody has left their logical levels and I think it's been spoiling. Logical levels is just a nominalization, in fact, two nominalizations stuck together, and the verb underneath it, what is the verb underneath it? Logical levels. It's actually leveling, layering. We layer one thought upon another, one memory upon another, one intention upon another, one belief upon another, and as we layer it, we start texturing whatever it is that we're thinking about. So to think about logical levels and the psychologics of how we create different things is to think in a more fluid way so that it's really always fluid and always moving and never a thing, never static. So to introduce logical levels, in your notebooks we have a whole series of descriptions called meta questions. This is on what page?
19.
Page 20 in your manuals, meta questions. And you'll see 4 pages. And then after that, you'll see this diagram, facets of the mind. It's a diamond of consciousness. And you can see that looking at that diamond, there's many perspectives, views, facets for experience. So the four pages before that have 26 questions. 26 questions. And each of these questions is a logical level. And in answer to the question, well, which is the highest level? Well, there's none higher because it's all fluid. And whatever you believe about something, you could have a value about that. So if we start from joyful learning, Is joyful learning, is that a belief? Could you believe in learning being joyful? Yeah, that could be a belief. Is that a value? Could you value joyful learning? Could that be an identity? Is that who you are, a joyful learner? Could that be a decision? I will find joy in learning. Could that be an intention? I will. And that's my outcome, that's my agenda. Have joyful learning.
Could it be a skill and a capability?
That I do joyfully learn.
I do joyfully learn.
So as you go through those 26 questions, we have 26 ways in. So if you ask somebody, what do you think and feel about that? I don't think about anything. Well, what do you believe about it? Oh, I believe this. Oh, so you believe that? No, I don't believe that. So what does it mean to you? Oh, it means this. So we have 26 ways in to find the structure of the levels of the mind. And this is going to be really, really important as we start utilizing the meta-state patterns, because if one word, one phrase doesn't work, use another. Use meaning, use intention, use belief, use value, and you can just see the 26 different questions. Each of these are facets of the same thing, which is experience and how we frame experience. So I'm going to stop right there. Mike, you want to add anything to this basic introduction to metastates?
Well, just like, even though we have 26 questions here, and there's 26 different ways of looking at it, it is all the same thing. It's just different ways of talking about the same thing. I've had people sometimes say, well, you know, in metastates you have all these, it's meanings, it's values, it's beliefs, it's intentions, it's generalizations. Well, which one is it? And, well, it's all of them. It's all the same. Is it this or that? Yes. It's this and it's that. And so it's different ways of talking about the same thing. And it becomes useful to know that, because knowing the questions and knowing the 26 different ways you have to enter into someone's consciousness can really help to pull out the information that you need. So you can ask a question in a little different way. As Michael said before, if you say, well, what do you think about that? Because, well, I don't think anything. Well, what does that mean to you? Well, what it means to me is. Well, you actually asked them the same question from one level when you said, what do you think about that? But saying, what does that mean to you? Well, what type of value does that have for you? You're saying the same thing coming from a different direction, and it's going to pull out the information that you need, or if you're seeking to help someone make a change, it helps them to move in a direction of making the change that they want. But it's really, basically, it's all the same thing, just different ways of approaching it.